It is 6 o'clock, and I am now recording, and I know I'm recording. Let's see, my icon is bouncing, so that means I'm getting through. And let's see, today is September 25th, 2019, and this is ITSC 2347 at Collin College in beautiful downtown Frisco, home of the Cowboys. Let's see. We're talking tonight about our program. And most of this class is programming. This is about programming. It's really not about memorizing stuff and taking tests. So this is going to be a programming class, and I think I'm going to keep it pretty much as that. If we're going to keep our sanity in programming, we have to have some kind of method to our madness. And the way I arrange my programming scheme is I think what has to happen first and second and third and fourth. So I break my code up into files. Now, I wish I had a way in this programming language to say, okay, I want to just execute all of these at once, or boom. But unfortunately, it does not give me that easily. In Oracle, it does, but in SQL Server, I don't have a way to say, okay, just execute them all, select them and say execute. I have to open each one of them. But I might put some of them together because of that, but I want to at least take them apart for right now and think about what has to happen first. So I'm going to think about what happens first. And the first thing I see happening is the first thing we talked about was creating the tables and the table constraints. And this was the, well, we had three players. We had the players, we had the games, and we had the rounds tables. And we talked about what went into each of them. And I've added one more tonight. I've added one more table that I think is important to this, and that is the errata. And sometimes students will misspell that as erotica, but no, that's not what it is. It's errors. So this is where errors go. And I'll talk a bit about that. The players table is all pretty simple. Players table just has an ID, a name. I've added the name and the date. We could add a password to it. There's other stuff. Well, don't shake your head at me and make faces. Now, your face is going to freeze that way. It's not real important to the idea of what we're doing. So we're getting the scheme down of our game, and then we are worrying about this more about the security of the tables than we are about the minutia of the game. Later, we'll have a really cool rock paper scissors game that as we get to the web page. We'll make it cool. Here, we don't really care. Here, we want it to work. And so I've got a games. So I've got players, games, and rounds. The errata table is a log file. In the log file, I just kind of throw everything in there. So I have I have a place for everything that I might have an issue with. And notice that I don't have any constraints on this thing at all. Notice I got lazy with my primary key. I just put it in line. You're not supposed to do that, but sometimes I do that. And I don't have anything, everything else can be null. And when I have an error, I'm going to write everything to this table that I have. So if I have an error as we are inserting a player, I know the player ID, I know the player name, player date, the rest of it's null. If I have an error in the game, I can put this stuff in there. Yes.
So you are going to record whatever is happening and keep it over there in that table?
I'm going to record errors.
Because I was thinking that like that correctly. I was thinking to have the code of the description.
Okay.
And I'm going to have, for example, 7, 8, or 10, whatever. And every time that I incur in one of them, I just only get the description and hold it to
Okay.
show it to the.
Every time we have an error, I'm going to record the error. Now, we need to talk about what is an error, and I'm going to come there in a minute. We've been working on some of the stuff, so let me work through this briefly, and then maybe I can come up to what you've got. But I'm only going to record serious errors. If it's just a routine thing, I'm not going to record it. I'm going to record errors that I think are serious that have gotten through. Let's see. Okay, so this is my error log, or it will be. It's just an empty table with places to put stuff. Okay. Then after that, I have my sequence. I used to have students do 5 or 6 different sequences. I had a sequence for the game ID, a sequence for the player, not for the player, the users give us that. For the game ID, for the round ID, for the error, I had a different sequence for each one. So each one would be 1, 2, 3, and then the rounds would start off at 1, 2, 3. I'm going, we don't have to do that. All we need is 1. We just, we start off with 1. I take the game ID, and then the round ID would be 2, and if there's an error, that'd be 3. And they're all different. So they make a perfectly good primary key. I have 4 billion different numbers. I'm going to be there for a while before I use them all. So I'm going to use one sequence. That makes my life a whole lot easier. I can put this one in with something else if I wanted to. I don't have to. This is so simple. I don't need it as a separate file. I put it as a separate file because it used to be. I just got used to doing that. And then my functions. Now my functions I created as I thought I needed them. I have my functions as I was working through my procedures. I thought, well, wow, I need a function. I need to be able to get the player name from, I know the player ID, I need the player's name. So I know that the player's ID, that what they chose was Slasher, and sometimes I might want to know their name. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Maybe I'll use it later. Maybe I'll just delete it. If I don't use it, I can delete it. Okay, so if my player's name, the primary key is Slasher, and his name's Bob or Jill or Joe, whatever his name is, I can come from that and get the player's name because I thought maybe I will want that. Okay. This one, get game ID, is this is probably going to be the most useful one. Get the game ID. I have 2 players. 2 players uniquely identify one game. Anytime I have that situation, I'm probably almost certainly going to need it. So 2 players in order give me 1 game. 2 different players cannot give me 2 games. So Joe and Bob can only be in 1 game, or none maybe. And so if I give you Joe and Bob and ask what is the game ID, it gives me back the game ID. And this is an important piece of code. It will be very important for inserting a round, because the players, when they insert a round, aren't going to know their game ID. They're only going to know their user IDs. And I have to be able to come up with that. So basically, this is the important one. This starts off, it says if they're backwards, put them in the right order. And then go figure it out and return the game ID. Go search for it and return the game ID. Some test code. This is the big one right here. The name isn't that important. A couple of functions. Okay. New stuff for tonight. Tonight we're going to be talking about triggers. So a trigger is a procedure. And I've sent you some code that where I'm creating a couple of triggers for you. So a trigger executes when something happens in the database. They are different across servers. How they are done is different, but what they do is the same. So the way you do it is very much different. I suppose it is like spoken languages. How you say something might be different, but the human interaction that happens in the spoken language is the same across cultures. As I remember, I was corresponding with a young lady in Mexico when I was a young man, and she wrote me back a letter, and the letter said, "I wait for you because I want you." Now, if you're an English speaker, what does that tell? What does that say to you? Uh, whew, ah, ah. So what did she say? She translated directly from the Spanish. So te espero porque te quiero. I hope I see you again. You know, it's not any big deal. Um, and the languages are like that. They will be different in the syntax of the language, but the thing that you are trying to communicate sometimes gets garbled in it. But for the most part, if you look at it and really think about it, you can see what happened. And it was obvious to me what, she had translated directly using her dictionary. And as I probably have done too. Yeah, I'm not going to say what I did, what I said. Uh, um, Everybody goes, oh! But how it does it will be different, but what it does is the same thing in all of them. And as you go from one trigger to another, a trigger executes when you do something that changes the data in the table. Triggers never execute on select statements. Select from where does not cause a trigger to execute. A trigger executes when data change. So what would that be? When you insert, when you delete, when you update. Okay. You can also trigger changes to the table, and frequently do. But for right now, we're going to be talking about inserts, updates, and deletes are going to be the triggers. And some things we just don't ever want to happen. We never want people to to delete. You cannot delete from our table. You cannot update our table. All you can do with our tables is insert. And I'm going to block anything else. And I'm going to check your inserts very well. Now, what is it that makes an error? So we have done our procedures, and our procedures do something like, I didn't look at the procedures. Insert a, okay, let's look at the procedure. Insert a player. Insert the player, and I wrote it once using a trigger, using a try catch, and I decided that wasn't a good idea. And I'll talk about why not in just a moment. So I went back to this one and insert the procedure, insert player. Let's see, what am I inserting? A PID, a PName, and then my error return code. Okay, what do I check? Well, if there's no PID, send you back a 1. Is that an error? I agree, it is. how that's my stockbroker. He'll live. Is that an error? No, it's not an error. What gets caught by the procedure is not an error. What gets caught by the procedure is expected. That's routine noise that comes in. The procedure's job is to catch that and kick it out. Okay? We're going to allow anybody in the world to use our procedures. So as they use our procedures, they're gonna put junk in there. Okay, happens. That's going to be executed by the web page. People are going to come up to the web page. They're going to get through it, and they're going to put PIDs in that already exist. They're not going to check. Yes.
Well, that is not a evil like a database, but for us it is because we don't want them to put on.
I agree. I agree. We don't want them to put it in, but this is where we're supposed to catch it. Okay. You know, is it wrong if we get an error here? We're supposed to catch it here. And this is the place where they're not supposed to get through here. So this is our first level. Our first level of defense is the procedures. Okay, we're going to get, so on the other side of those procedures is the great unwashed internet. They're going to throw all kinds of stuff at us. That's supposed to stop it. And nothing is supposed to get through there. But if it does, then what do I do? Okay. So these are, this is supposed to catch it. If it does catch it, what does it do? It just gives me back a 1. It doesn't stop the world. It just sends me back a 1. Hey, we had an error there. Oh, well. And I tell them on the web page, okay, it came back a 1. And I say, sorry, error, error, error. No. Okay. The same with the others. This doesn't really talk. It never throws an error. You never get a big red mark across your page from the procedure. That's the idea of the procedure. It's very nice, very polite. Sorry, error. Just sends you back an error message. Look at the error message, you get a 0 back that says everything's fine. You get a 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. They have meaning and they're documented. Then what? Then they try to insert. What happens then? Okay, when they try to insert, so the procedure has taken it. The procedure checks it, checks everything. Is the primary key unique? Before it tries to insert, checks the primary key. Is it unique? Checks it, make sure it's not null. I think that's all it's got to check, really. Because anything else, I mean, you can have a duplicate name. Just maybe I don't think I forced you to even have a name. So is the primary key null? Is the primary key unique? That's the main thing. What if it's not? Somebody got through there with something that wasn't right. They shouldn't have been able to get through there with it. So when they get through there, we have a trigger. And as soon as they try to insert, we have a trigger. Okay. What happens if somebody tries to delete? They're not supposed to. They're not going to be able to see the table. They can't execute delete. What if they do? Something is wrong, dreadfully wrong. This we have to act on. Okay. Now this we're going to raise a database error in this, and we're going to use the trigger. Now the trigger is a piece of code that executes in response to an insert, update, delete. I'm going to show you. I think let's do delete first. That's the easiest. Just no. And if you try, we're going to report you to the authorities. And so what happens is we're going to throw an error. It's going to put a big red line across the page, and it's going to log it. Now, what can I log? I can log. What I'm going to log is just what's easy. but I can execute this trigger as the administrator. I can I can find out your terminal. I know where you live. I know your dog's name. I mean, I don't, not really, but you know, I know quite a bit that I can get about where you are, and the, you know, where is your system, how are you logged in, what is your IP address. I can get all that stuff, or the administrator can. I can shut down the database if the attack is too bad. So basically right now, I'm just going to throw an error and log it. And let's see, let me, okay, let's see what happens. Okay, here would be a fairly simple procedure. Or excuse me, a simple trigger. This one says, you can't delete. If you try to delete, we're going to take your shoe and keep it for a year or two. It says that this is the name of the trigger is no delete players on players. Instead of delete, don't delete, do this instead. Now I'm going to come back to this one in a minute. This is where I log it. That's where I throw the exception. That's what gives you the big red line across and says, oops, stop. And now when they execute it, they can be in a try catch block, and they can catch it or they cannot, but they're going to get an error. You know, this has been escalated now. So this is no longer, we're not playing nice anymore. When this happens, we're taking it seriously, and we're throwing a database error. Okay, so here's the error. I can throw any number. I can choose numbers. I started with 51001, and I think I'm working up from there. So anything above, I think anything above 50001 is, and including that, is mine to use. The severity, I don't know how severe that is. 0 means it's just a code I send back that says what you need to do about it. And then the message, delete is not allowed. Okay. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write the errata. I'm going to talk a lot about this one right here. Prohibited operation, delete, attempted, thumb, thumb, thumb. Now I'm writing this to the errata. It's going into the message. I didn't, that's about all the information I have. So it gets, I didn't give it a date. I should have given it a date stamp. Could, and will in a minute. But the important part about this is there's a lot here that I want to talk about. If I throw an error, if my trigger throws an error, everything that happened in that trigger, everything that happened in that procedure that caused that trigger to throw the error is rolled back. Everything from the point where it started into the procedure tried to do the insert raised the trigger threw the exception, everything rolls back. None of it happened. Nothing gets inserted. Nothing gets deleted. Nothing happened. Because why? We threw an error that says stop, ERC, come to a halt, give them a big red message across their screen, and back everything, roll everything back. What else rolls back? That error log rolls back. The error log rolls back, meaning that writing that message to the errata table did not happen. So it gets tricky. Now, this is going to be an important little piece of code tonight. Okay, So try to follow with me. Now, I showed you the errata table. That's nothing. That's easy. Let's look at the at this procedure. PROC tells you it's a procedure. Write errata. It's pretty simple also. It's right down at the bottom. Write errata. Look, it gets a whole bunch of parameters. But look, they all default to null. There's only one that's required, and that's the message. Only one parameter is required. I have to tell you the message. It says, hey, this is what this thing's all about. The rest of the procedures, the rest of the parameters, all have unique names. So if I have a foreign key, I will go ahead and I stick a FK on the end of it to make it named differently. So all of these parameters have different names, and any of them can be null. All of them can be null. None of them have any requirements. None of them reference anything else. That's just a place to put it. It's like a sketch pad where I can put anything in there or nothing as I choose. Only thing I have to do is pass it a message. Okay. Then, by the way, I need the parameters in here for T rounds. That'll be another 4 or 5 in there. So there's a bunch of parameters. So every time I have an error that happens in the trigger, it's going to write the errata table. But I can't write the errata table because if I have an error that happens in the trigger, I throw the error and everything rolls back and it doesn't happen. All right, so insert into errata, all this jazz. That's all it does.
So, but I suppose we need that error.
You suppose?
We need the error.
Need
we
the?
Need that message. Or we don't need it.
Don't need what?
Do you need it? Do you need it in the table? Do we need it in the table?
I'm sorry, need what in the table?
That message.
Message, yes, I want the message in the table because if the message says I'm going to send you a message, I go, you know, well, I don't know how to spell that, but I mean, I said I guess I can put it in there somehow. No, I have to send you a message. I have to give you something that says what happened. Why am I putting this thing in there? So that's what the message is. And so I can document that. You know, what are these messages? If I say, you know, bad data, primary key violation discovered in GI in the games table. Why was there a primary key violation in the games table? There should not have been a primary key violation in the games table because the procedure should have caught it before it submitted it to the database. So this is the idea that the procedure is supposed to have cleaned everything, and if it didn't clean it, why not? It needs to be fixed. We should never get these, but I'm going to put them in, I'm going to open them up to where I force some of these errors just so I can see them happen. And I want to see it happen. Okay, question. This is just simply, it's just a procedure question.
Well, and actually the question is, I think maybe going to be answered now by what you said, that you're going to force the procedures to generate an error. Because when you said the procedure is going to generate a delete error, and you know,
let me stop you there. I'm going to go around the procedure, and I'm going to try to insert directly into the table with bad data that I never should have been able to have done.
Okay, but so, like the delete wouldn't come from one of our procedures; it would come from a script
that's true.
Calling one of our procedures, right?
I don't know where it came from, but nobody had better be able to get to our database with a delete command. That should never happen. So basically, we're saying that something that should never have happened just happened. Now, what do we do?
And that's what was kind of when you were back a few minutes ago showing the code about errata and the error procedure for delete, and you said, okay, the tricky thing that's coming is that, you know, the insert won't happen, nothing will happen. The insert into table errata won't happen. So yeah,
Right
like
here.
this, where it's delete not allowed. And you said the procedure won't get executed, and we're
Yes.
going to learn how to get around that. But that's why I was saying, well, our procedures will never create this. This will be some incoming code from a script, right?
I don't know where it comes
Application.
from. It's coming from an attacker, assumably, or something that has gone wrong, dreadfully wrong. So we should never get here. We should never be at this line right here I'm pointing to right now, line 212. We should never execute that line. So I've blocked it every way I can, and the way I've mainly blocked it is I've hidden the tables from you, and I've only given you the procedures we've written, and one of the procedures isn't delete, but somehow you managed to get through. So here you are. Is that making any sense? So we are under attack at this point. Something has gone very, very wrong. And so this trigger is what's stopping it, blocking it.
So I'm kind of weak, but how does SQL accomplish that? Like how does the trigger, so you know what I mean? What part of the processing is where it's monitoring, you know, where is this processing done on the database where it's monitoring every incoming action?
Good question, and that is an expensive process. The database does monitor every incoming action. It monitors everything that happens, particularly those things that change data. And when something happens that changes data, it notes that, and it executes certain code or can execute certain code. If there is no trigger and you say delete, it just deletes. But if there is a trigger that says don't delete, do this instead, or it might do it afterwards, so it can do it instead of or afterwards. For example, I might have a delete trigger that says, don't delete that record, go in and instead of that, set a field to false that is called active. Set that field to false. And then the record stays in there, but the user thinks they have deleted it because they are looking at a view that is only showing them records where that guy is active, and they think that the data are gone, but they're not really. So that's one thing. For delete, I don't want to allow anyone to delete. Let me get into this server. We've got a little bit of work to do on the server.
Okay, thank you. And actually, I think I think I did. I think I've kind of got it. That the command trigger itself is attached in SQL sees the command trigger and must somehow know to which of its own internal database procedures it looks to monitor. It's got to be something under security.
Well,
I think I get it.
Yeah, the triggers happen. The triggers happen every time that there is a delete. That trigger happens. Now, maybe you haven't written a trigger on it, but the trigger happens anyway. If I were to take this throw out of here, see this throw on line 215 I'm highlighting now? If I were to delete that line, then everything would be just peachy keen. It would write to the errata table. But when I throw that error and roll everything back, that's where the life gets kind of exciting.
Oh, thank you. Now I get it. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, one thing is you can write a trigger that just goes, I always write a trigger that says bang. It prints bang. Every time the trigger fires, it prints bang. And so then when you delete something from if you delete 5 things from the database, you see bang, 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 bang. I mean, no, and that's a nice little tracer. Okay, let's look at this guy. He looks, he's a little strange. He's got an interesting word in him. He has a word right here called loopback. Now, that's a word that is used in database frequently. And it in other databases, it goes by different names. Some people call it an autonomous process. Some databases, Oracle calls it an autonomous loopback process. SQL Server calls it loopback. What that is I've created something that causes this to execute independently of anything else. So I don't care what happens when I send it over here and I say execute that thing. I'm cutting it loose in, are you guys Unix, Linux people? Do we have anybody that programs Linux or Unix? It's called cut it loose as a daemon. In other words, say, okay, execute this, and I take my hands off of it, and I am no longer executing it. It goes away. It leaves my control. So when I execute this procedure write errata like this, I'm saying I let it go out of my control, and it just happens, and now I can throw the error, and it won't stop this thing from happening. Okay, now how that works, how that happens, I have to create something for that to happen. And I need to create that before I get here. So this gets to this idea of loopback. Now, loopback is not a reserved word, but it is called loopback. We call it that because there are so many different, if I started naming it anything I wanted to name it, then it wouldn't match what the literature says. So I've named it loopback because if you decide to go search on it and you search on a loopback server, you're going to find something about it, even though that's just a name that we make up for it. Okay, I'm going to open another file. Create linked server. Okay, and I'm giving you this code. Now, this code has to be executed as the administrator, because to create a loopback server, you have to be the administrator. So that means that in order to execute this, you log in with Windows authentication. Then later you can log back out. Basically, the lines 5 through 8 just essentially say, does it already exist? If it does already exist, delete it. So it's just like saying, if the table exists, drop the table. That's what it says. If, it's a little strange. It says checks for the name loopback. I could have named it foo. But if I name it loopback, then it will keep the same name. And if you look up some literature on it, it will match what they're talking about. So then if it does exist, I drop the server, name loopback, and I drop the login. It's gone. Okay, create, execute, add linked server. So this is known as a linked server. It is another server. It exists beside my server. So I've created a second server that acts like a server. It's an alias server. I have two servers. It is expensive in terms of memory and whatever, but I can execute something on either server. And if I execute it on the linked server, then I can throw an error on the first server, and it won't affect what is executing on the other one. Now, this is the code. I'm not going to go in detail the code. The code is a little bit cryptic. It's a lot cryptic, actually. But basically, the server's name, I make that up. I could have named it anything I wanted. I named it loopback because that's what they're named. Server product is null, dash, dash. The N doesn't, I meant to take that N out of there. That says it's a long character, a 16-bit character. Provider, and the data source is the server name for us, that is SQL Express. I could have put SQL Express in there, would have been the same thing. So basically it just says create the loopback. The next two lines right here are configure what we call the remote procedure calls on that server. They have to be there. So if you execute this, it will work on SQL Server. It will create the loopback server. If I were to go over here to my Object Explorer and I were to look under server objects, and one of them is linked servers, I will find there the loopback server exists. I can look at its properties. And here I find that RPC out is true. Enable promotion of distributed transfers is false. And those are the two that I need because I want it to stay on that server. Whatever I put on that server stays on that server. So basically this gives me the ability to say, okay, do it over there. Now, if you go to another database, you're going to find completely different ways of doing it. This is how you do it in SQL Server. You're going to have to look up something else. It'll probably be called loopback over there too. They tend to call them the same things from one database to the other. But in Oracle, for example, it is called an autonomous transaction, meaning that it exists on its own. It doesn't need anything from you to execute. So once you start it going, it goes. Same thing is true here. So once I have done this, now I put some notes in here and a web page in there. I sent you this this file. All you have to do is this guy just gets executed one time, and after that he just sits there. You don't have to execute him every time you start your server. If you move to a different computer, you'll need to start him. He just runs, and so if you shut him down and you wake up your server, he's still there.
So when you get in a computer to run this one and install it, create another partition.
That's one way to think about it. A partition, I guess, in the database. Yes, a partition in the server. You can think of it as that. So it splits it into 2 servers or 3 or 10. And I can have stuff run on one that is independent of what happens on the other one. So whatever happens in that first server, SQL Express, when that one throws an error, if it has sent something over to the loopback server, that thing on the loopback server continues to run, and it writes to the errata file regardless of the error. Okay. This is an important little technique. And this is the code that does it. Basically, I just use this code. I don't. Every time I need to write one of these things, I just go grab my code and and I call it loopback. Why? Because all the books call it loopback. But if you want to call it autonomous server, you can call it anything you want.
It works, leave it the way it is.
It works. Leave it the way. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Yeah. But if you change the name loopback to something else, and you changed it every place that I use it there, then it would work fine. You can call it X if you want to. Okay, now in the trigger, notice I say execute. I had a note in there that I was supposed to have this semicolon in there. For some reason, it doesn't make any sense to me why a semicolon has to be there. I'm going to leave it there because it doesn't hurt anything. You can test it and see if you can get rid of it and it still works. For some reason, I had a note to self, but that was on an old version that semicolon had to be there. I suspect it's probably depreciated. We don't need it anymore, but I'm going to leave it there anyway on line 11. So this guy right there, it says run him on the loopback server, and I need to have the fully qualified name. The name of the database, my database name is RPS_DB. Your database name may vary. I'm not telling you what your database name has to be. And DBO is database owner. I'm going to talk a little bit about a schema, and we might create one. We'll see. Start it, and then here's the message, and the message says, uh-oh, somebody doing something dirty that they don't need to be doing. Okay. Now, if I provoke that, and let's see, I have some code here. Let me open it, and let's see, I'm testing it. Here's my test code right here. So let's see, I'm going to delete everything in the errata table. Well, it'd be nice if I did my use first. Delete the errata table. Take a look at the errata table. There's nothing in the errata table. There's not supposed to be. And let's look at the players table. There's stuff in the players table. What's the first player in there is named Baz, B-A-Z. Okay, let's delete him. What's going to happen? I'm going to delete you, Baz. Ha, ha, ha. Boom. Got a red line across it. What does it say? It says procedure. Error level state 0. In other words, that was the state that I returned. I could have, anything from 0 to 255 is legal. There's the message ID. I'm not sure what level 16 means. Procedure, no delete players. That's the name of the trigger. Line 11 of the batch. Well, actually it's on line 12, but it's close. Batch start line 11. Delete not allowed. Create triggers. There's the message that it sent back. Delete not allowed. I could have gotten more verbal than that. And then what did I send? I sent that we detected this. So we blocked it. And now what is, if we go look at the errata table, what do I find over there in the errata table? I have that line in the errata table. Had I had any other information I could have put in there. I should have timestamped it. I didn't. I got lazy. Go ahead.
Question?
Just a minute, I've got one coming here. I'm gonna put my microphone over here. Why, what about the error message?
Why we are saving e-message in the
Because I have to give it an error message. I have to tell you, if I'm going to record all of this information, I have to give you something. I have 200, maybe 512 characters to use. I can write you almost a book on it. I need to tell you something that will help you try to figure out what happened.
in the future references, right? In the future, it's like something that we wanted to have. What kind of error message we get? And
In the future, well, the documentation is important because I need to write practically a book on this software, and I need to tell you exactly what do I mean when I say prohibited operation, delete attempted. That's a little bit cryptic, but at some point you have to have a way to look it up and find out what that means when I could also have written the error code in there 5000001. I could have.
we can have the person who wants to, the user, like
If I wanted to capture the user's information, the user's IP, their terminal number, and all that user ID, I would have to write the trigger as the administrator.
what
I could. Usually, that's kind of overkill, I think, for this. And I'm sorry, let's see, someone was asking a question online.
Yeah, do you have to, could you use a table variable instead of a linked server as a place to test that delete?
You could use a table variable in place of the errata table, but not in place of the linked server. The linked server is pretty much necessary, and it's got to look kind of like that. So I would keep that guy, I would hang on to that code, because that's the code that will always create one. And then you can change its name, so you can give them numbers. You can have 10 different linked servers if you want to. And they can all go to the same tables. So basically what it is, I've got 4 tables, and they're shared among multiple servers. So I put something on one server, on a linked server, and then my server, the one I'm on now, errors out and everything rolls back. But because I put it over on another server, it continues and it writes to the table. So my stuff gets logged. And this is how they log stuff. This is how you log and throw an error at the same time. And it really is used a lot. Did I get your question? I'm not sure what you mean by a table variable.
Well, and no, that's okay. I was just curious because, you know, you said that linked servers are very expensive, and certainly for, you know, a big company. But since table variables allow update and delete without altering your actual table, I wondered if you could use a table variable as a place within to test. Because in that way, you're on the link server, you're basically testing for the delete to allow it to go through without disturbing your, you know, your actual table that's shadowed, right?
No, that's not really what I'm doing. I'm trying to call 911 and have them charging in and rolling everything back, but I want my mail to go out anyway. Right, so I put the mail in the slot to go out, and then essentially I call 911, and they come bursting in. Everything rolls back. They confiscate all the mail, but they can't get to that because it's gone out with the United States Mail, so it's a higher level thing. I guess I'm getting. I suppose my metaphor is working. I want to throw an error. The error is going to roll everything back. It is a big deal. It's a kind of drastic. Everything stops no matter what we've done. It didn't happen, but I want that piece, that error message, to get written to the table. So I'm not testing it there on the linked server. I'm using the linked server to get through that crisis rollback that I'm going to be in. Yes, Juana.
Let me see if I understand. When you are in your service, you are rolling back. You don't have anything. In another service is that you hold the message.
Okay.
And you take it from our service, that one, and now you have the message.
That's a good, Juana is saying you have 2 services going. Yes, I do. I have 2 of them. Let me, right here, two lines getting executed. The first one says, okay, send this thing out to be written. So I send it out to be written there. Now, take my hands off of it. It's no longer under my control. It's off on another server. Now, everything rolls back, but not that. And this is how you do it. This is how you write to a log file, a log, and you don't write to files in database, you write to a table. So this is a log table, and it writes to the table, and it throws the error. that this is how you do it. Questions? Pretty important little piece there. Okay. Other questions? Create triggers, create link servers. Okay, I gave you the code. Here's the code. I gave you creating the errata table. You have this attached to your an announcement, I believe. Check and make sure, please. And so this is creating the errata. This one creates the right errata. Here's the linked server. So this one, you want to keep this code. It'll come in handy. And it's kind of hard to find it in that form because, I don't know, every time that you go looking for something on SQL Server, you end up with a whole lot of stuff that you didn't really want to know. And people asking you, why do you want to know that anyway? Drives me nuts. Why aren't you writing in Oracle? Huh. Thanks. That wasn't what I was asking. And then I put you some notes here. Here's a very useful web page on that stuff. And finally, I created the triggers. Here is the trigger. Create or alter trigger. There are two kinds of triggers in SQL Server, an instead of trigger and an after trigger. I can fire it after delete. In other words, I can go ahead, make the delete happen, and then go in and clean up the mess I made. Or I can just not do it at all. And in this case, it's there to block insert. I'm going to show you one more trigger. By the way, to turn it on and off, if I want to, where's the other piece of this? Okay. I guess I need to send that again because I'm missing one of the triggers. To turn it on and off, what happens if I want to delete the stuff from the table? You know, I can't. It's going to block me from deleting it too. No. So I need to be able to I need a switch on it where I can turn it off. And this is this is the switch. If I say disable trigger, no delete players, now I can delete. If I say enable, now I cannot delete. Okay. Well.
Can you do that also when you start your process?
Yeah. If I drop the table and recreate the table, they're all deleted. But maybe instead of dropping the table, I just want to delete everything in it. And if I want to delete everything in it, guess what? I'm going to get stopped by that trigger. But if I disable the trigger because I own the trigger, I can disable it. And it's nice to be able to do that or not. I've got one more here. I should have put this one in there. I'll resend this. I guess, I don't know, I guess I just spaced it. Okay, this one's a little bit different. This one is checking insert. Okay, now I don't want to block insert. I have to let you insert. Okay. If I don't open a hole and let you insert, then what good? I mean, if I just block everything, well, gee, you have to be able to use the database. So that's the whole idea. I want to just open just a little letter slot for you to get in there and do what you have to do, and only what you have to do. So I'm going to let you come in and do that. Now, the first piece of it is that we have there are two tables associated with the trigger. One of the tables is called inserted, and the inserted table holds a copy of the of the rows that are coming in on the trigger. There is another one called deleted, and that holds a copy of the rows that will either be changed or deleted. So if it's an update, for example, inserted will have the rows values before they're changed, deleted will have the values after they're changed. If it's a delete, the inserted won't have anything in it, and deleted will. And if it's an insert, what comes in, and there isn't anything in the deleted table. Sometimes the tables will exist, sometimes they won't. I haven't found any rhyme nor reason to that. In other languages, they are called new and old. So new is the stuff coming in, old is the stuff going out. They work the same way. Now, what am I going to do here right away? First thing, I'm going to go into count into the inserted, what's coming in. How many rows are coming in? Okay, when I write a trigger, I really want, when I get good at writing triggers, I'm going to allow you to have more than one row at a time coming in. But right at first, I suggest that we restrict it to one row, because when I allow you to insert and delete multiple rows at a time, it opens a whole bucket of worms. So I'm going to restrict you to one row. You can delete one row or insert one row at a time. You can't, put commas between 15 rows and try to insert them all in one swell foop. You have to put them in one at a time, and copy and paste is your friend. Okay, because that's the way they're going to come to me from the web page. So I'm going to restrict you to one at a time. Here, this is what does it right there. Select count from inserted. How many rows? If it is greater than one, stop, error. That's not a particularly big error. But if I'm restricting it to that, then you really shouldn't have been able to have done it. So I'm going to go ahead and write to the errata table, execute loopback, prohibited operation, multiple insert attempted, and throw the error, multi-row inserts not allowed. This is just because it's a whole lot easier for me if I do that. Okay. Then I start. What's coming in? Player ID, player name, player date. What's coming in? That's what the procedure is trying to insert. Now, I'm going to go into my inserted, and I'm going to select the data. Get the data, put it in these local variables. Check it. The ID is null, or it's already there. I have a primary key violation. Log it, throw the error. Otherwise, I can put it in there. Okay, let's see how it works. No, I think I already have a fee. I already have a fee. What am I going to put in there? XXX. This player's name is XXX. Now, this should work. Notice I'm doing the insert. I'm doing an insert. I'm not calling the procedure. The procedure will block that. So the procedure is going to check before it tries. So if I did the procedure isn't going to provoke the error. I have to provoke the error from an insert statement. So if I do the one row affected, So it happened. There's XXX at the very bottom. Okay, let's do it again. If I try to do it again, what's that? Yeah, I did something terrible there. Oh no, I'm gonna get an error. I got an error. Oh, I hate when that happens. Okay, so what did I get? I got a trigger from the trigger, check insert trigger, line 31, primary key violation in players. And if I go up to the errata table, I find, oops, I just deleted everything from errata. Oh, well, I can do it again. But I need to put a trigger on the errata table, don't I, that not lets you delete from the errata table. So if I try to do it one more time, let's do it. There, I got my primary key, and now I do select from errata. And there's my error in the errata table. And so if I try to let's see, and then comma, I'll get it in a minute. Okay. All right, so there's a line with 2. So I'm going to try to, so ordinarily these would work one at a time, but because I'm trying to put 2 in there, it's going to say multi-row inserts are not allowed. That's not a serious error. That's just, I just don't want, I don't want to deal with that. It makes it it's very difficult to write the trigger. It's a whole lot easier to write a trigger if you can restrict it to 1 row at a time coming in, 1 row at a time getting changed. If you can restrict it to that, if there's any way you can restrict it to that, do so, because it makes your life a whole lot easier, and we're going to make our life easier on this one.
Question?
Go.
If you have 2 errors, like if you had set PID to be an identity field that auto increments and you tried to put in ZZZ instead of letting it auto increment, that would be a constraint against the table as well as a trigger issue. Do you get both errors? Do you get 1 error? Do you not? How does that work?
You would have to write your trigger code to catch it. And so if you have set it as an auto increment or as an identity that auto increments, you may do that, by the way, then you would need to catch it if you gave it a PID that it would trip the trigger before it tried to put it in.
So the trigger, I'm kind of wondering, like, which error gets caught first? The trigger error, does the trigger, once it gets to the trigger, has it already checked table constraints? Or
no,
is the trigger
the trigger comes before. That's an important point. The trigger fires before the table constraints. Table constraints are your last line of defense. You never want to hit a table constraint. So the idea being a trigger fires before the table constraints, and the trigger can actually override the table constraints. The trigger could check to see if the insert that you were doing was valid, and then it could turn off the identity. It could turn on the identity insert it, and then turn it off. So the trigger can override the identity.
Thank you. Wow.
Yeah, the thing of it would be you'd check it. So if I gave you a PID, so I say insert this PID, but you have an identity set up on it. I detect that in the trigger. So my trigger code says, okay, first of all, can I put that in there? Okay, everything's fine. It will go. So my trigger says, executes the code set identity insert on, meaning now I can insert that. I insert it into the table, and then I say set identity insert off, and I put it to one more than that one. So if you have, values like 1, 2, 3, 4 in there, and you say insert 300, 300 would get inserted, and then the next one to get inserted would be 301. So you'd, but yeah, you could do that. The trigger can disable the table constraints. The trigger can allow you to put in invalid foreign keys. It can just disable the table constraint, the foreign key constraint, put it in there, and then re-enable it. Now, I don't know why you'd want to do that, but it could do that. If you tried to put in an invalid foreign key, it could just change it and put in a foreign key that was to a dummy record that you have as the parent of stupid people that can't get their foreign keys right, So you'd have a foreign key that would be -1 that you'd give them when you didn't know what else to do with them. You'd give them that. So if they're coming in from a web page and they're not supposed to be, there's somebody supposed to check it, well, I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway. It's kind of like you have a lot of power in a trigger. In a table constraint, the only thing I can do is look at the table. That table in its existing state. I cannot cross a table. I cannot go outside of the table and check, does something exist in another table? So if I have a account number in one table and the account information in a different one, I cannot, with the table constraint, go over to the other table and check and make sure you've got enough money in the account to do whatever it is you want to do. A trigger will do that. So the triggers are extremely powerful, and they are also extremely dangerous to your database, because what would happen if one trigger caused another trigger to fire, and that other trigger caused something that made the first trigger invalid or something like that, and you got in this ping pong effect of two competing triggers, kind of like dueling banjos, only between tables and triggers, and you can get into that situation. So it's kind of like a deadly embrace with triggers. So one trigger says, stop, you can't do this, and the other trigger said, no, you have to do that. So they just sit there and play ping pong. Do what? You scream very loudly is how you stop that. Unplug your computer. No, that's one of the worst situations that you can get into in a database, is to have one trigger causing others. We call it, cascading triggers or recursive triggers, triggers that cause other triggers to fire, and these cause other triggers to fire, and you have these millions of triggers all executing from just putting in one little value, and it can literally cause millions of triggers to execute. And that's what you'd like to avoid. But sometimes everything, if you do something that causes a change that cascades through the database, where you have a kind of a tree structure in it, and it just grows and grows and grows and grows until it finally gets to the end, I can give you we're not going to do anything like that, though. We're going to have triggers. Our triggers are going to check one thing, and our triggers are not going to cause other triggers to execute.
Stop it and get back up.
Yeah, well, you have to get it stopped somehow. Oh, I could think of it. What would happen if I inserted something into the errata table, that I had a trigger on the errata table that tested something and something was invalid. So my code inserted something into the errata table. The errata table fired a trigger that tried to roll it back, but when I tried to roll it back, that caused a trigger in the base table to fire, which tried to reinsert it. And I would be in a mess then. I mean, yes, it would lock up. And my whole database would just freeze. And that is a very that's what they call a resume generating moment. You don't want that to ever happen to you, but it can. And so triggers are triggers are incredibly powerful because I can span tables with them. I can do literally anything with a trigger that I can do in the database. I can fire any SQL code with some exceptions. I cannot create a table in a trigger. They've at least taken that away from them. Yes, ma'am.
How do you stop that? Because it freezes.
How did I?
How do you stop the process for continue going?
How do you stop the process?
Yeah, because all the
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
hitting each other and trying to fight for it.
No. Sooner or later, the world is a bathtub, and sooner or later, you run out of room in your bathtub, and you filled it up, and the fire department gets called, and it stops. You run out of memory. It's I can show you code that if you run it, you will get in lots of trouble. If you write a code that says, okay, while forever, just execute forever, and then split into two. And then so it splits into two branches, and then those split into two branches, and then those split into two branches. And in about a fraction of a second, you have completely locked up your computer. You are using up all of your available resources. You cannot log in to do anything. You can't do anything. Your system supervisor finds out, wait a minute, you're using up everything, your whole allotted time, because on a shared computer, your whole existence depends on you not using everything, right? So we all have a certain slice of time to use, I don't know, the bathroom, for example. If everybody decided to go to the bathroom at the same time, we're going to have problems. We assume that won't happen, but it can happen, and in computing, it's very real. So people will write sometimes code where one trigger causes another trigger to fire, and that trigger that fired the second one violates the first one, so the first one shoots again, and that violates the second one, and yes. So you just really have to watch your code and triggers. I don't think we're going to be vulnerable to that, but you can try it, see if you can do it, see what happens. Let me know.
I know in real life when we are new,
You can always turn off your computer.
we always put off something.
Yeah, well, the real world is a messy place, and this is just a fact of life. So triggers. I want us to have triggers. I want us to use triggers. I want us to demonstrate triggers. Now, how many triggers do we have to have in our code? I want us to demonstrate. I want you to block insert. Excuse me, not insert. We're going to insert. So only insert. Block delete and update. Like that. Like the example I gave you. I will give you the other trigger, check insert. It works. I don't know why I didn't send it to you. I didn't.
One last question.
Go ahead.
Granted, we are novices, but as a person who's been in database and all these years, do you use triggers at times to debug how bad data, like when you can't figure out how someone's gotten bad data into tables, do you use triggers as a debugging tool?
I have never done that, but I can see why you would. There are logging tools that are out there that are already built, and they use triggers. I would probably reach for something like that that's already written for me, where I can just grab what happens and why they're getting the bad data in there. The triggers are, and as we are going to use them here, as we're going to write them, the triggers will tell us when bad data will alert us that we have the probability of getting bad data. Because if we're hitting the triggers, something isn't working that should block it before it gets there. But yes, that's essentially what we're doing. We're putting the triggers in there as a debugger. So yeah, I would say that's a valid way to approach it. And say, you know, well, what is it that's causing the problem? I can trigger I trigger the event. Okay, so if it's getting bad data, I'm triggering the insert. So it's going to fire every time that anybody inserts. And then what I'll do is, if I'm looking at one particular user, I'm going to say, okay, if it's that user, then log it. So I can filter it down somewhat.
Thanks, that's cool.
I don't know. I'd have to, you know, I'd have to see the specific, but I'm certain that a trigger would be a good tool. Triggers are one of the bigger problems and one of their greater strengths. If they're misused, they can really trash a database. If they're used correctly, they are incredibly powerful piece of tool that we have. Let's see, what time is it? Okay, it's about time for us to, I wanted to give us some time to work on our code. I wanted to help you with your code. And people who are here can pull up your code and I'll come by and take a look at it. If you are online, you can pull it up and I guess send it to me and I'll be happy to take a look at it. Let's see, I'm about ready to grade it. I'm not gonna do tests in here. I don't want to fool with them. First place, it would be a real bear to write one. And I'm not sure what exactly I would ask on a test. It's more as this is more of a programming class. So we'll have plenty of stuff to do, just getting programmed. So I want to get us to the point, our first benchmark then is getting our procedures running, procedures and functions. So I gave you some procedures that I want to implement. And as we get going here, here's what we're going to do. Do what? Okay, we're going to grant execute. We're going to let the public execute our procedure, insert player. The public gets to execute insert game. The public gets to execute insert round. Public will be the web user. So the web user is going to be out there. The web user is going to have little places where you put your PID and your player name and all that, and then a nice little button that you push, and it goes and sends it to the database and comes back and tells you, yes, it's good, or no, it's bad. Okay. Hopefully we'll design something in there before we try to insert it. The web server should check it first as far as it can. Then it goes to the database. So we're going to let people do this, but the average person out there in internet land is not going to be able to see our tables. They can't see the tables at all. They can't see that there's a table called players and a table called games and a table called rounds. They won't see those. They will only see that procedure, insert player. They'll know how to call that procedure and they'll know what it gives them back. And that's all they're allowed to know. Okay. I'll get that updated file posted, and I'll do that right now. Okay, I'm gonna pause the recording. Let's see, somebody sent me a chat. Okay, let's see. Okay, back to my share. Let's see, Tracy, I'll look at that chat in a minute.
Well, that wasn't me.
Oh, okay. I didn't say it. It looked like it might have been something.
But it is about that loop. But it is still back on that loop link server, and
I don't know
why you have to have it in order to get through. It was similar to the question I had.
Oh, okay, it's from Chris. Okay, Chris, you still here? The loopback server was there to allow, and for the same reason, I did not want to throw the error. I did. Remember, we talked about using try catch. If I put the try catch in there, if I do a try catch and I do the try to insert, what happens is it tries to insert, it hits the trigger, and it causes the error where the procedure should have blocked it. Instead, the procedure tries to insert it, and it throws the error from the trigger. So I don't think using try catch in the procedures is a good plan. Does that make sense? Let me pull it up here.
Well, I'm sorry, I missed the first about 15 minutes, and I don't know if you covered this, but I was kind of just wondering what's the purpose of creating this link server?
Loopback server?
Yeah, I just
okay. Let me see if I can cover that real quickly here.
Okay.
When I create the loopback server, because I want to execute both of these commands, I want to log the error, and I want to raise the exception. Therefore, I'm going to put I'm going to log it on the loopback server. If I put it on the loopback, that is like an autonomous server that is going to act independently of what happens on this one. If I don't have the loopback in there, if I take the loopback out and I just say write errata, then when I throw the error, it will roll that back, and that will not happen.
Okay. Still struggling with it a bit. I guess I'm still struggling with it a little bit because in this trigger we do want it to stop because we don't want them to delete. But why the loop back part of it? I guess it could just
the loop back is there to log. The loop back is entirely for the logging function, because I want that log to happen, to be written to the log table, and I want the error to get thrown. If I just throw the error, if I say, okay, write it to the table and then throw the error, what will happen is it will roll back everything, and the error message will not get written to the table.
So, okay, so is it a way to sort of thread the situation so that
thread, you say? Yes, that would be a good way to look at it.
okay.
I cut loose a second thread. I open a second thread and send it down that thread, and then the one that I'm in now errors out. So
Okay.
threads are a good way to think of it. Yes.
Okay, that clicked for me. Thank you. Got it.
Okay, I'm going to send this. Okay, this is the updated file.
So are you gonna send the file?
I'm sending the file out attached to an announcement.
Okay.
And let me check and make sure I've got everything saved. I didn't have it saved last time. So yes, it is ready to go. Choose the file. And save. Okay.
I sent you the creation of my thing, but now I know that the errata table is not right.
Okay.
I need to go home and fix it the way that you want.
Okay. Well, I'll be happy to look at them.
Well, I sent it to you.
Okay. No.
And the two first procedure, I think they are pretty much the same. What is supposed to do is
Okay. I'm going to turn off these overheads while I look at code. And I'm going to close down the share while and you may send me code.
Yeah. I mean, I send it to you already in number and whatever.
Okay, let me,
last week, okay? So
yeah.
I haven't touched it this week because I have been working a lot.
Let's see. Procedure, this one right here.
No one is just
De esa van.
Yeah, I need to do some stuff. See, I was doing here the stupid thing that the right, left, right. But you told me that you told us that we can do the procedure to move it in the right order.
Well, let me pull it up here. Well, just a minute. Let's come over here, Juana. Website project procedure update scores. First thing is, do you want to? What is the name of your database?
My database is for RPS.
RPS.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to say RPS.db. That's the one I'm using.
I have trouble. I cannot do create in Arter.
Okay. Let me. I'm going to use Scratch. Scratch DB because I don't want to overwrite stuff that I have. Alter procedure. Okay. Do you alter?
Create the first time. The thing is my
yours doesn't do it.
Yeah.
Okay. So you must have an older version then. You have older. Oh, okay. In that case, you have to do create, and what you do is at the top you just say you do it like a table if
I like that.
object ID.
It's no goal to create, and if it's not, draw and create all the time.
Okay.
And create all the time.
So then you just create procedures, update scores. Okay, this now you have to have, must have go. Okay. Create procedure, update scores.
You know that I learned. Tell me that I'm not
Well,
doing
just
stupid
a
thing.
minute. Let me see what's this. So this is updating. Okay, so this is updating the scores. Now I like to. Declare. Select P1, P2.
If you haven't called
Yeah,
those
we
tables,
need to create the plays table. Cursor for this one. I do you have to have those parentheses there?
I think so. In my case, for my
Okay.
crazy version, it is.
Okay.
But I'm comfortable with that.
Yeah. Go ahead and put your create. Give me the code that creates the table.
It's in the.
It's in here.
Other. There is two.
Okay.
I send you two.
Okay. So that one creates. Then we open. Hang on.
So give me this weekend.
Okay. Yeah. Sure. Let me say fetch next. Open. Okay. So here we have now these. I think that these should be indented there.
Yeah, I know. I need to
Okay.
organize.
Begin. If. Else. Begin. If. Set. Else. Set. That goes here.
This one goes to the next one again.
Well, let me begin. This is the fetch. I think I would probably put it like that. So there's this and there's a close. Okay, so let's see this. If P1, what is the, why is that there? P1 equals set.
Sorry, CP1.
Mm-hmm.
CP1.
Right. Those are the counters. What is it? P1 equals C1. What is C1? C1 here. C1. So these are your input parameters. Okay. Let's see. So they're output parameters.
I think I'm missing the P.
No, those are CT. That's CT1,
yeah,
CT.
I think I'm missing the P. No, sorry.
Okay. Here. Let me see if I can get them on the same page here. Input, output, or C1. So these are coming in. Okay. I'm with you here. Now, I'm not sure I understand this right here. So P1, what is P1?
P1 is the file.
Where is P1? Okay, select P1. But where? Oh.
To check the page.
Yeah. Okay. There. Where declare? Here they are declared. Like this. Declare the cursor. Okay, I spread those out so I can see them. So there they're declared. Fetched next from the cursor. Open it. What? So why are you saying this?
That is stupid because I'm telling you now I need to go and do the little thing that you were saying.
I'm with you. I mean, I'm not gonna bunk you. I'm saying that I'm trying to see how you're thinking here.
No, the thing is when I remember this, if I sent it to you last week, and remember that you said, what well, you know, if this one is graded and this one, whatever. And I said, that is stupid because I tested this and why is it doesn't make sense for me, but now I know.
Okay,
Because
well, what I'm just saying is that you're getting P1 and P2 coming in.
and
Now, where did these guys come from? I don't think you need these. I don't think you need C1 and C2. Those are chars, and I don't think you need them. Wait a minute, Melanie. I don't think that they're doing anything for you. Because when you call this update scores is going to open the table. It's going to read all of that stuff from the table. So it reads it right here. So this is select.
place.
Yeah. So we need to have the place table. Select. Okay. So you're getting the stuff from the plays table. Open. Okay, so I can see that plays table is up there. Then for no, we don't. Sorry.
I'm reading. I'm
Yeah,
just
yeah.
reading.
There we are. You're right here. You're right. Touch next into. That's right. That's right. FP1. Okay, now this one. So,
Doesn't make
so
sense.
right? No, it doesn't. That doesn't make sense. Everything else is right. Okay. So if P1 is equal, so we're not going to use these guys at all. So if P1 equals P2, right? What have you got? Begin. I don't need this. Set tie count. He started at 1. Gets tie count plus 1. Add 1 to it. Okay. Else, you don't need this. This begin is not
It doesn't
necessary.
necessary
It's not doing
because it's just
anything
only
for
one
you.
line.
Yeah. Else. Don't need this begin.
That one you needed. No?
Else
Okay.
if
P,
P1
P1. So that is gonna be P1.
P1 is R and P2 is S, or rock beats scissors,
Paper beat
paper
rock,
beats rock.
scissor beat paper. So always the first one is gonna get 1.
Gets
Add 1.
P CT, CT1 gets plus 1.
And whatever,
Else.
add whatever.
Else.
That's it. Add whatever. And one of the end is extra. But that it wasn't the one that I wanted you to see.
Okay, anyway, that's got that fixed. You don't need these guys up there. They're not doing anything for you. And that's really all you need. And then we call the procedure, call them to,
Because,
wait
you know,
a minute. See, you're trying to pass these guys in, but you're not passing it in. That's not how you're using it. You're using it by running it. Okay? But that's fine. This one, that line isn't right because you don't need those guys. I'm not sure what you're doing here.
I know this it was that I was sending and sending the crap.
Okay. Basically, you get your answer after you've run that loop up there.
Yeah,
And then you come out, you've got your counts.
no, but this is what the first one, the crappy thing. Okay, that's okay. I will try it. I want you to see. Take crazy one. That it wasn't what I wanted you to do.
There's the file.
Yeah, okay. The one that I wanted you to do, to see really was, just a minute, sir. The homework that we are doing right now, I send it to you in that stuff there. I send you to file. One, the creation. This is it's a pretty lady over there.
Part one.
Yeah, that is the one that I wanted you to see. I brought you to create,
Create the procedure.
create the procedure. No, create the table first. Let's go with the table. Now I need to fix the errata. I need to fix
Well,
the
you can
errata.
add that. I'm just giving that to you today.
I know. Hey, I'm not complaining.
Create sequence.
See,
I would name it errata and not erratas,
okay.
but it's fine. That way we would have the same idea, the same names.
Okay. See, I was creating just only two here. That it was my mistake because I was seeing it like, for example, we are gonna.
Okay. I see what you're saying, and that's fine. What we're going to do with errata is going to have a lot more fields than that. So we're going to go over to players, and we're going to get all of these guys from players, copy them and paste them up there. And then we get all of these guys and copy them and paste them up there. And then we get all of these guys and copy them and paste them up there. And where we have foreign keys, like here, for well, that's,
yeah,
that
this
looks
is
like it's named.
this is from the game, a foreign key.
So you've renamed it down here, so it's got a unique name. P1 ID, P2 ID. Yeah. It looks like everything has a unique name.
And you know, here, the second sequel. I did it crazy because I went to Google, but now I know it's so simple. It's just only 4 lines. I will fix it.
You don't have to say this stuff, but you can just say all you have to do is say that word, and it'll give you, because all of these are the defaults.
Yeah. Okay.
So it doesn't hurt
yeah,
anything.
I
It's
know.
not
I
wrong.
can delete this stuff.
Cache, the cache. I wouldn't do cache 3. If I would do cache, I would do cache 20.
Okay. Well, that one I know that I need to add the stuff for errata, no erratas. Okay.
Insert into.
No, this was when I was thinking that I need to do. Okay, that is, I think it's pretty clean. I just only need to work with erratas.
I think I would name it errata.
Well, errata. Okay.
Name it erotica.
Okay. Yeah, procedure. Is where I'm screwed up.
No, I'm not going to save this.
No, that's okay. Don't save it. I know the. Let's go to the C. Because I didn't work today because you know what I was doing? I was building a chicken coop.
Building
Chicken coop. Coop. You know? Yeah, coop. I'm sorry, chicken coop. I have 4 chickens.
Let me look at this. Alter player. Create. To drop and then create. If you cannot say create or alter,
I will do what you told me.
Probably have an older version,
I do.
and that's okay. You can still use it, but just say, if drop, if exists, if object ID is on the drop procedure, just like with the table, except change the, instead of table, drop table, you say drop procedure. It's the same.
And
Let's see what we got here. So create procedure.
remember that
0. Okay, everything looks fine there. What's the matter with it?
there is one thing. Let me see. Not in that one. The next one.
Next one. Okay. This one looks fine.
Yeah.
Insert game.
In
Insert.
that one,
Okay.
my problem.
So I've got two. What I need to insert a game, I need 2 players that are there. That's all. So boom, if PID is null, if they're null, okay, that's an error. Now begin.
Yeah, it was my mistake. That is good.
Now select what's this? Select. This doesn't make any sense.
No, because
From,
I know how to fix it.
okay, well, let's see. Okay, so first of all, check see if they're null. Then after this, else. Check that they're both in players.
Well, this is what I tried to do in the crazy thing.
Well, you just have to say, if exist. Select,
Okay.
it's
Because you know what I'm missing over there, the important piece, that little block of procedure that you create when you said that the player 1 have to be, if it's bigger than the player 2, it changes the place. Do you understand me? This is what I'm missing over there. This is why it doesn't make sense.
That's pretty easy to do. So if P1 ID
is bigger
is
than P2 ID, then and record it too, because we are gonna record in the table in that order. That is it. Remember, I was thinking when I was testing this stuff, when I was trying, I said, why does he tell this kind of stuff? It didn't make sense for me.
Okay.
But now it does.
Now, if they're not in the right order, just swap them. Okay. Now check that they're both in the players table. Kind of like you did there.
Yeah, that crazy where.
Okay. Yeah, this I see what you're doing here. You're saying you're counting them and saying if the count is not equal to 0. Okay. There's a better way.
How did you do it?
Okay,
I was thinking.
Better. Okay. If exists. Select. From games.
So I'm gonna go 2 times to the same table.
No, you just have to do it once. So I usually come down that from games or whatever you're calling the T games. Which where
oh my gosh, Professor, you do the same crazy thing that I do. Copying and paste.
okay. Then you gotta.
Okay.
Then
So
you gotta do
so I don't need to do this. Oh, I need to.
No, you don't need to count.
Okay, but I look for in the file. If it exists, I go and check all the stuff. If it doesn't exist, go here and show whatever. I send a message.
The first thing I would do is check to see.
Yeah.
The easiest. What's the easiest thing to check is are they null? So is either one null?
No, that's okay. I will fix it. The thing is, I wanted you to see it.
Yeah, I know. Check nulls. Okay, that's easy. You can do it right there. Then, if they're backwards, make them in the right order. Then you're going to check to see if you already have that game. Because once they're in the right order, they're now you can check in one order. So that then check to see if they're both in the players table. And if they're both in the players table and they're not in the games table, you're ready to put them in. Don't count them. If exists, like, see, you're doing the same thing.
Yeah. The only thing is over there.
I wrote this.
So delete my phone.
Don't count. So you don't want to count. You want to say if exists, because as soon as it gets one, it can stop. If you say count and you got 10 of them, it's got to keep counting until it gets to the end. But if you say if exists, it's got one. It's done. It's finished.
Why did I forget that?
And then it's at the error level, whatever. And I think that's really, this is fine. This is right. So if exists, okay. So first check for nulls. Do you have any null? Are they null? If they're null, you're out of there. That's error one. Then if they're backwards swap,
if I find it, if it exists,
are they? Is it already there?
Send a message.
Check. Now you got to check the players, make sure they're both there. So you do the same way. If exists and exists, you can check them twice. It wouldn't make a difference.
Yeah.
And then if they exist in the player's table, you're done.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I'm gonna do the last one. The how do you call the last procedure?
Insert to the rounds.
Yeah. I have an idea how to do that
Well,
now.
the rounds table is where you're going to need the function. That gives you back the game ID because the rounds table is going to need to insert from the name from the players' names, but we need the game ID. So I come in with the players' names. And I need to be able to get the game ID.
Okay. Yeah, no, that's okay. I'm leaving.
I'm gonna send this back to you.
Yeah, I will clean up everything and
Okay.
send it to you there. And then
I'm gonna send it to you now.
okay. Thank you, Professor.
Surely.
Bye-bye. I will work on that. I'm gonna clean it up.
Okay. Yes. Who's first?
I have.
Who's on first?
That they dropped me last week. I didn't have the course. Yeah, and they put me back yesterday.
I sent them an email.
I emailed them a lot. I called them, and then yesterday I gave me back the
So they put you back in?
Yes.
Okay. Because I sent an email to them. I
I
said, wait a minute.
I forward your email.
Well, I sent it to them.
Yeah, I forwarded them. I said, this is my professor said that it was wrong, and then
I didn't put your name in.
I don't know how they did it. It was like busy semester.
I can't see that any longer. Once I send it, and I don't think I sent it. I don't know,
No, it's not sending. I think something.
So, Professor, I have a.
So you're in the class, is that?
On the study program, something.
Okay, let's.
That is from first session. So this is my. I haven't studied seriously. I wanted to know.
Okay, so this is.
It's a down part. I haven't studied.
Okay, so what are we doing here? This is the function. Okay, so we're going to create the function now. One thing I always want you to remember: whenever you create a function or anything, you have to have go before it and after it. Um, and then, so let's see, create, return char1 as, begin.
And I haven't checked it was not correct thing.
Yeah.
I haven't started.
Okay, author term char1 returns char1 as, and usually what I do here, I usually tap in like that. I
like it too.
I like it to look like that. And then, well, let me look at it here. Begin, okay. If they return to else, else. Everything's fine, else, and then at the end we have the return null.
Yeah, I haven't checked if it's not C or R or S.
Actually, let's see.
I mean, like another condition that
Well,
it's
yeah.
no one else.
Well, you could check that at the beginning up here. You could say
Can
something.
we put it at the end?
Yeah.
Always can put it at
Could you drop through to it? Well, what you would have to do is you would have to have another one like this for player 2. So so you could put it right there. The easiest thing to do is something like if P1 in oh, well, if you can say or, you need to say not in. So, and same thing. No, you don't. That's all you really need is that. So then this one has a then you start down through this. If P1 and let's see, we don't need then, do we? We don't need then. That's not good. If then, if T, else if. And then this one, you have, actually this will work right here. Okay? So if you think about your logic, saying, so we have the start, we check to see if it's good. If it's good, then is it a tie?
But if
No.
I wanted to include X.
Okay, you could. It would go right here. This would be where it okay. Remember that it has to start. First, is it good? Okay, it's good. Is it a tie? Okay, else, well, is it a 1? Else, it's got to be a 2. Well, what if this one is false? Where do we end up?
as X. And we have to put another return again.
No,
right?
we don't. The
Oh,
last
okay.
statement
I
is
read
return
that.
that. See, this is the last. I don't like this logic that it's doing, that it's making us do, because
Because at the end,
think about
I wrote that
this.
return null.
Okay. Now, if first of all, let's focus right here. If that's true, we have good data.
Right.
So we're going to do all of this jazz. Else we've got bad data.
X.
Return X. But if I try to do that, I get an error message. Why? Because the last line has to be a return statement.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. I have a return, I return something.
Yes,
But
no, return no.
Well, I'm saying you can't get out of that.
Yes,
There's
that's true.
no way out
No way.
without hitting
That's
a
true.
return statement. No,
But still they won't be able
Okay, but I'm saying it's gonna make it so. What I'm saying here is, instead of saying else, I don't have to say else right there. So
and you can just to return at the
I
end.
don't need another return.
No,
That's called a drop through. Okay,
Oh,
so if this is true, let's say that one's true,
yes,
then what do? We do all of this.
yes. So,
If it's false, let me finish. If it's false, do nothing. And we end up here.
what about if they cursor goes to return one, for example?
Uh-huh,
They get return one,
uh-huh.
and then
Here.
get out.
Okay,
And
we
again,
return
return
one.
X. It's
No.
gonna come back to,
No, when you hit a return,
it goes out of the function.
it goes out,
Okay.
which it makes it is stupid to say you have to end with a return. It's like I have this ejection seat. When I hit return, I go boom, and I'm out of there, right? And nothing else executes. So this is this last one here, making you do that. This is better logic. That is better logic, because no matter what happens, you are at the end of your logic. You if, then, else, end. Okay, but let's say if this, then if this, suppose that's true, we return T, we're done. But if that's false, then we do this. If it's true, we do that. If it's false, we do that. So we're going to do something in here. But if this is false, what happens? We do what we call fall through the logic. That is very bad. Okay. Now I can put the else here. Okay. And to keep it happy. Now we've got our logic. I usually tap in. Else. And then this one I would just put down there, just because I'm mad at it for making me do it. This will never be executed. It will never return null. Because you're always going to hit something before that, but it makes you put it there.
So my problem,
Your logic is correct.
Yeah, I mean, I can understand. The thing is, and what's my problem with TSQL is that declare and that go and that those things I don't understand. It's
So-
like,
Okay.
why I need to declare, why. So now I'm
Okay.
going to create a table here.
Okay.
I
Now let's
understand
see.
this
Go. Okay. Now wait. First, you're going to create something. So here's this word create. What comes before create? Anytime you write create or alter,
all the time.
all the time before create always comes go. Now what that does is that breaks it into two different programs essentially. It says make everything happen. Now create something. Okay. So we create our table.
And why give me a message?
I don't know because one I think maybe because of no go. Sometimes not having a go after the create table will cause issues later. Invalid column name player 2 PLAYER2 insert into game player 1 comma player 2 values. So let's see this run. Oh, right there, comma. So we can get creative. Line 36. Okay, what we will do is we'll go to tools, options, text editor, all languages, general, and click line numbers. And what did that say? This is on 36. It's right. Create table game. Oh, there's no as. As is. And then we insert. And now we'll test him. I'll say, yeah. I'll say select player 1. Player 2. And did we execute this? And that's RPS better. RPS. I think you have to say DBO here. Yeah. I do not like this language, I'll be honest with you. Well, okay, it's like we have a saying in the United States, I don't know if you've heard it or not. If you can't be with the one you love the one you're with.
I think about
Well, we have that saying about programming. If you don't get the one you like what you got.
Yeah.
You don't always get to choose.
Yeah. Yes.
That's what it means. Although love the one you're with is kind of, in English we would say that word, that saying is risque. Risky.
Yeah.
Okay, winner, and let's pass it these 2 books. Now here we put an as. And I just always give it a name, even if it's X. It really doesn't matter what you name it, but I just don't like saying, okay, why is that not? Select PL. No, I don't think I need to have that in there because I'm
On
selecting.
the top, I have it.
Select player. Well, they're in there. Player 1 has X from. There we go.
Okay, so now so this is the result. So
And then there's the function getting called.
function call because I wanted to get the answer, and I can see it as winner. Here, it should be like winner, right?
Yeah, you can name it something. Yeah. Touch that wiener. I'm making fun of your accent.
It's winner. Is that any problem when I say bird? Do you know bird? Bird.
Bird.
I never happened that I say somebody bird, they understand me in the beginning. I need to repeat that, and at the end I need to do this bird, and then they understand.
Just
me.
to show
Bird.
I always
the
have
body
a problem.
language.
I have a
then-
problem in Spanish saying the word for door.
For dog.
Puerta. I can't get that.
It's, yeah,
can't
it's
roll
like
it.
something.
Puerta.
What's that mean?
Door. Port. Portal.
I have a, I get English.
The Arabic also has
a stress in some words, so the Spanish the same. It has a stress in some words, so bruto. Yeah.
Well, in Spanish, it's very regular on the stress. So the accent is almost always on the second to the last.
Oh, my
So
goodness.
in English. Okay.
I understand perfect now. So why we don't have declare here? Why we don't
Because you're not declaring any
declare?
variables.
What's the declare?
Okay, declare. Let's find a declare.
You find. Oh,
Okay. Okay. Let's do it. Let's do it with the declare.
No, I mean, I just wanted to understand. I just wanted
We
to
don't
know
need a
when-
declare.
Here, yeah, we don't, because. if-
Okay. Let's change it and make a declare.
Let me change my
No, I'm gonna modify a little bit here. Okay. And why? Because I've got to create. I have to have a go. Go goes on both sides of create. Create anything. Go. Now let's change this. Let me. Declare. My answer.
It's called. No, just to declare to the some integer or char or something.
No, I'm just saying this is I'm declaring this variable. I'm going to use it. That's a name. So, you know, okay. It's like X. I'm making it up. It's a name that I'm giving something. Now I can give it a value. Let's give it a value. Oh, that'll work.
Oh, yeah.
No. If then say set. It's T. Else. My answer. Else.
Okay, so the declare always comes with the procedure, right? It's not. It's not. It's not so
It comes anytime that you need to have a variable. And so a variable is just, I mean, I see how I'm doing this different.
Because right now I saw you wrote the set, because set to me is always comes with the procedure. instead
Well,
of function.
no,
So
it is, I'm setting this variable to be that, and then I say, my answer. Now, look at how this works. So I started off and I said, okay, this is my variable. I can do anything I want to with it. So any character I want to make it be. I want to make it be the learn. And then if T's valid, if we're okay, I set it to T. First I check it as T. Then I go on. Then I do it too. And so if I execute this, let's see. I don't need this return null anymore. It's not doing anything. Execute the go. And now we have is already there. So we should be able just to execute this. So now it comes back and uses the where, then deliver. And what happened there, we
Just say it's like input.
Right.
Define some variable and then set it as.
But have you programmed in a language before? What language?
Java, C.
Java. In Java, you say x gets 3.
Yeah.
X is a variable.
Yeah, it just.
So in Java, in Java, you would have written this code a little bit differently. It would have looked something like, in Java, it might have looked like begin. And then, of course, you need some other stuff. And then you just said, my answer gets, actually, I think it's a double quote there. So and you said, what was the jar? So there's the declare. In Java, you declare there's char. Up here, it's the same thing, but it's just a little more verbose. And that's why I don't like this. Certain things I really don't like. It's long. And everything you do is a lot of typing. Okay. But that's just the way it is. I just like it. And so you're doing the same things that you've always done. So the gifts are much shorter, in particular in C. Like this compared to like that. But that's the TSQL. I don't like some things about it. I don't like about it. Some things I really don't like is that I cannot call a procedure from within a function when I need something that, for example, if I want to swap the variables.
Yes, I saw in the video that yes.
And I'm saying, I've got my parameters are backwards, and I want to swap them. I've got a procedure that swaps them. Why why can't I do that?
So, and just because, Professor, the function return a table. And
Wait, we haven't done a function returning a table yet.
Okay, no. Oh, yeah.
You can.
Yes.
A function can return a table. That is a very advanced idea. Right now, our functions just return things like integers, char, date. It can return a date. It can return, a function can return a player's name.
Okay.
If I give you the PID, I can get the player's name. That's a real easy function to write. So we're sticking with easy ones. This one's easy.
You can
Yeah.
keep going with those.
The thing of it is the logic that we're doing isn't that hard. It's just that it's the programming language is tricky.
Yeah, and the problem for the logic professor is that I'm always in the refrigerator when I'm thinking of something. I'm always in the refrigerator, I'm eating something. Yeah, unfortunately. My brain's
Every time
working, but I'm
Every time I
walking.
lose my keys, I go look in the refrigerator to see if they're there.
Oh, yeah. Okay,
Um,
professor.
So, yours?
And let's delete the intern.
Okay, what are we're looking here?
Yes.
Well, this never gets executed. Oh, I'm just pointing out that I would
No, which I
Let
tried.
you get away without it, so. And this one is never gonna happen. Yeah, and you could get rid of this else and say return X down there. It would be the same logic. I personally like that a little bit better. If it's gonna force me to do it, this will never execute. So this should be fine. See.
I opened it with the, I guess.
Okay. That's fine. It's that should be. And so this is why this is just code here. Okay, now this guy right here. Create. Go does not have to be available. I don't know, I couldn't write it better. What do you want me to say?
No, just. So what are your counting?
It's awesome.
Yes, what are your counting?
No, we
How
counted.
many there?
She's counting where the winner is to.
I didn't.
You didn't have to.
No, I said.
She's an overachiever.
No, please don't do it with us, okay? You do that in the class always they don't like it. Actually, I'm not, but because that's a good idea. I want.
I put most of my time on programming into the design of code. And I don't worry a whole lot about the counts. I can do that. That's pretty. I fuss over things like the design, and I'm always thinking in terms of how could I do this without the if then else. So can I take the ASCII code of this R and somehow convert it to a 1, a 2, or a T? I've never found a way. It's circular. But I'm always trying to, I can't find any better way than that.
Yeah.
You could ask, you could say, if the first one is a T, then you could have, if the second one is a T, it's got else. So I can break it into first one, and then if, second one, if, third one, if. But
We can do that?
yes, actually, it wouldn't be a bad way. You see, this way gives you one comparison. This 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 comparisons.
Okay.
And so, if one R, then if 2
Oh, yeah.
else RP of 2 P, then it's 2 is 1. And so if you look at doing it that way, so I only need 2 here. So I would, if I counted the number of comparisons, I would have a lower number of worst case comparisons. So And then I always specify. I'm always
When I
asking,
was in Turkey, professor, because I lived there for 2 years. Yes, and because I couldn't stay in my country, I actually I didn't like politics there, so that's why I didn't move to Turkey.
which I'm not going to be in Turkey.
That's a good weather, good food, but actually the living there is
A young student came to my office. Dr. Smith. Do you think I should smoke marijuana?
yeah, there's, oh my goodness, when you're walking, all the people when during the break time, outside, so many people. I don't know why, but
He
the
said,
weather's so cool. I don't know why they.
he said that, you know,
Yeah,
in his country, they would go to prison.
That's it. Oh my goodness.
That's what he said. He used to drink.
Oh my goodness.
I've never been to Turkey. I've always heard that
Yeah,
hashish.
the weather is amazing.
Oh,
Food is awesome. But over there, when I moved there, and I bought a package of SQL, Java, and all those in the same as my country language, and I'm going to most of the time problem because they teach me Farsi, and when I want to translate it, it's so funny. I mean, it's not funny, but it's hard to understand. Some things is the same, but some of them to understand. That's why I saw right now a lot of video to understand them.
You can find here, there's nothing wrong here. There's this good too.
For me, it's at work now, I'm doing like small work, Excel or something. The most thing that I think is understand what they want, what they want, understand that. Yeah, it's not our language, but it's different language because we need to understand.
And I mean, yeah,
And then
we can understand. We can.
and
That's our problem.
Yeah, I work with many people who speak other languages than English. So I am very careful always to speak my English very slowly and very carefully.
Yeah, I'm sorry we bothered you so much for that.
But I try to, and I work, if the person can understand English, they can usually understand mine.
yeah.
Because I'm going to very slowly, very clearly
Yeah,
state. And I command them. If I am around people who have an accent, I will pick up. I'm saying,
You haven't noticed that
What?
you haven't noticed that
But no, everybody has an accent. It is impossible not to. But I will pick up one, no matter where I am, I will pick up that accent. So, for example, I'm going to New York, I will pick up a New York accent so that.
I hear that, that's different. Yeah. I've never been any city or something, but I hear, yeah.
So you do speak with like their accent very quick.
Very quickly. And for example, I'm sure that from one side of the country to the other, you can tell where a person is.
Yes.
And in fact, I'm told in that part of the world, the accents are very regional. So you know exactly, is that person from here or not? Just of course, for me, I can blend in so fast if it's English.
Have you been professor in another city? Have you been live in another city? In the United States? You've been to many places. Which one is better? Which city in the United States?
I like Austin. Because, well, it's a young, I was young there.
And you have a long memory.
Yeah, I do. I remember this, but now it's very big up here. I like Seattle.
Oh, it's raining. But yeah.
Like the place. Not raining here. Anyway, what else? Well, when I was young, when I got back to Vietnam, and I took a taxi. And so I like driving. I drive at night.
That's cool, yes. I'll just
And
like
so
it.
I'd be thinking, yes, ma'am, I'm flexible.
I-
And then I go over there, pick somebody else up, and they go party, and they're drunk. and people mean. But, you know, you get your, I would try to always have I would try always to be ready to help somebody if I could. You know,
The teaching is the best way to help people. All people.
That's why I like to.
That's right, yes.
And since then, since I quit driving, yeah. Because, well, there is much future in that. I've been teaching, teaching has been, I've been teaching.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
And so yeah, I've been doing this. Okay, what else have we got here? Are we done here?
Yes, sir.
I don't know how you, what are you asking me? It's perfect. Perfect.
But, Professor, just a recommendation. If I don't understand at the moment in the class of some subject, something after that, you know, when I search in Google, I receive a lot, and I couldn't find my answer for sure. I have to see several videos to understand what this subject wants to be. What can I do for that? That's so
Here.
crazy, actually, yeah.
It's you've named a thing that's called I call it, I have a name for that problem. I call it something on a Ritz cracker problem. What do I call it? What do you want when you don't know what you want?
Okay.
Something on a Ritz cracker, right?
Yes.
Okay. What do you want when you don't know how to ask for what you want?
Maybe yes, maybe, yeah.
You know,
Something
and
that
that is a very real problem. And how you go about doing it, for example, I don't know, I always have to start, I just start with a general search and look for keywords that I can drill down into and find more out about them. When I was researching to do that linked server, I had to figure out how to do all of that. And that was not easy. I spent 2 or 3 hours.
Yeah. That's
And then
why I
finally got
want
it on
to
and it
check
works.
this professor, because last semester I had Python, and all of the project during the semester was cool, but at the end she said you have to give me the project, the biggest project. It was at the end, and by mistake I didn't get that, and I go through a lot of code. I wrote a lot of code, and she didn't want them, and I sent it to her. And she understood, because, oh my God, it was okay. But this one, it was so messy. It was so messy, a lot of code. And she just wants us for the word. And I wrote something about that and I explained how to kind of, but I wrote a lot of code. And after that, she said, okay, I cannot give you the point. I said, oh my God.
Well, we're going to do this. I want you to start working on your tables.
Sure, I did. I started. But
And yeah, this is practicing for them, and we're trying to get our feet wet in the language.
Professor, this very fast I can't, because my computer at home doesn't work, so another lab they have this here.
I think they do. You want to go check?
I don't know.
I need to go in there and check. I'm sure it's in there. What it will be, you will have to log in and
oh, my mom always I have candy.
you have shown it.
Two. They're in middle school. Both of them. I don't understand them and they don't understand me, unfortunately. But I try my best to understand them. You know, the oldest right now, yes, is Find a Girl. And I understand, he's so young, he's 14. And I told him, tell me something that I don't know about it. And he didn't tell me anything. Oh my gosh.
My
he's kidding me, but I hope everything is gonna be fine after.
My niece called. She goes, hey, I'm using it. My brother died. It's her father. And he said, I want to hear a story about my dad. Tell me some wild story.
Oh my God.
And tell her. But you
How
know,
old is she?
what?
How old is
She is in her early 30s. My mother passed. My mother left. But because she left my brother and me her trust. Several million dollars. And but since my brother has died, it went to his daughter. So I'm the trustee of all of her money.
Wow.
You want it? No, you keep it. I go, well, so now I have to. She's going to get it this year, whether she wants it or not. I'm tired of doing all the paperwork. I have to do the taxes. I mean, I don't do them. I send them to a CPA.
But it's still to go to
Okay, Boyles.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for today, Professor. You always best.
Next week is gonna be my last week
Aw.
here, and I come back. I come back after every 1 month. Hopefully it doesn't, war doesn't happen over there. and I
Let me
come
get this recording posted.
back. Have a good night.
Bye-bye.